Okay, so the recording just started. Okay, we'll try that again. Okay, well, we're going to do it from this mode. That's fine. Okay, so welcome everybody to our October 2017 monthly webinar. We've got not a ton to cover today, but we just want to make sure everybody is up to date on what's going on and review some things that we have noticed over the last month. So for the audit, we kicked off our first on-site visit with SC Whitmore. So if you see Michelle Bishop, please make sure that you congratulate her and her school on a job well done. The state will not give us any feedback until the entire audit is done, but they did tell us that they would let us know if there was anything alarming that they saw. So I'm going to congratulate Michelle. They have not told us anything alarming. But we hear that the visit went really smoothly, and we're just glad that she was able to represent virtual schools to our State Department. So coming up, we have our child count report, which is tables 1 and 3. And so there's a couple things you need to know about child count that you're going to be responsible for on your end, and then Laura and I are going to be compiling a lot of that data and submitting on our end. So the first thing that you need to know is that the child count date for the data poll is going to be on the 24th. So that's a Tuesday. It's always going to be a Tuesday. And for you guys, you need to make sure that all of your students have active plans in Enrich. So if you have a student that has an expired plan, let's say you missed the annual review date and you haven't gotten back to the table, or they came in with something expired and you're holding a reeval, or you had the meeting but you haven't finalized the IEP yet, any of those situations, that student is not going to be counted in your child count. And it's very important that all of the kids that are enrolled in your school with special education on that day are counted in that count. It's an unduplicated count, which means that once they pull our data, they're going to compare it to all the other districts in the state and make sure that none of our students overlap. So if we have a student that looks like they're showing up at one school in our district, but another district claimed them, it's going to be between Laura and I and the director in that district to decide where that student was on that day. So very important, make sure that all your kids have active plans, make sure everything's finalized and enriched. And then make sure on the 24th you take attendance, so that if I ask you, hey, was Johnny actually in your school on the 24th, or were they actually at their new school on the 24th, you'll be able to give me a quick answer, because that's what I'll take over to another district director and try to work out who was where when. And the last thing is what you're going to be responsible for is validating the child count list and obtaining the necessary signatures. So once we get our preliminary data, we're going to split that up by school, and we're going to send you a list of students that Enrich says were in attendance at your school with an active IEP on that day. So you're going to review that list to your records, and then you're going to have your school leader and yourself sign off saying, yes, these are the students that were in attendance on that day. So that is child count. And then I see a question coming in, so let me pop into the chat box real quick. I don't know if it will let. Laura's going to check and see if she can get in the chat box. If not, when I'm done with the presentation, I'll go back to the questions and answer those at the end. But Robin, I did see your question come in.
Make sure she shared it with everybody.
And if you guys could also, when you're typing a question, make sure that it's sharing to everybody so everyone can see the questions as they come in. Okay, so duplicates. Duplicates in Enrich, it's not just you. We have noticed over the last probably 8 weeks that duplicates are more popular than they ever have been in our experience. So when you see a duplicate, you'll get into Enrich and you'll look for your new transfer student, and it will say this student is a duplicate, and basically it will lock their Enrich information until the duplicate's resolved. So you're not going to be able to start a transfer IEP, work on anything on that student until the duplicate's resolved. So we're going to let you know how to do that in an easy way. So duplicates happen in Enrich when a student is a duplicate in PowerSchool, and because everything in Enrich pulls directly from PowerSchool, if there's 2 of the student in PowerSchool, there's going to be 2 of the student in Enrich. So to resolve this, the very first step you need to take is to resolve the duplicate in PowerSchool. Something that we've run into this year that's also kind of new, it hasn't happened in the past, is that the PowerSchool coordinators are only looking in one place for the duplicate. And I have been told, I'm not a PowerSchool expert, but I have been told there are several places in PowerSchool to look for that duplicate. So I have provided you with a link to a cheat sheet that you can share with your PowerSchool coordinator that's going to tell them how to find those duplicates. So I'm going to show you that really quickly, and this is also on the PowerSchool support site. So this is what you can use with your PowerSchool coordinator to show them how to find the duplicate in PowerSchool. Once they're able to resolve that duplicate in PowerSchool, it's got little screenshots on here so they can see where everything is. Once they resolve that in PowerSchool, then you need to email Laura or I and let us know that it's been resolved in PowerSchool and that we can merge the records in Enrich. So once the records have been merged in Enrich, it will take the overnight sync between PowerSchool and Enrich in order for that child to show up as not a duplicate or fixed for you. So if I merged a record today, it would take overnight until Wednesday morning for you to be able to work on that student. If there are times that it is crucial that you get in that same day, there are steps we can take to do it same day, but that's kind of a 1 in every 100 situation. So, as I said, there are several places in PowerSchool to look for a duplicate. It seems this year that the PowerSchool coordinators are only looking in one place. And what happens when they say they've resolved the duplicate in PowerSchool and it actually isn't resolved is that I merge it in Enrich, and it comes back the next day as a duplicate. So no matter how many times I merge it in Enrich, it's going to come back as a duplicate unless it's actually fixed at the source. So please ensure that your PowerSchool coordinator uses that one-pager to help them locate the duplicates, and that will really help us a lot, and it will get you guys much more quick access to paperwork. Okay, so some things that we've picked up on over the last month are just some quick notes and reminders. The first one is that we've heard a couple people say that RTI is a gateway to special education, and we know that that's not true. RTI is a multi-tier approach to the early identification and support of students with learning and behavior needs. So RTI is a process, and it doesn't mean that every kid that goes through RTI is going to get to special education. RTI is also not a special education initiative. It's a general education initiative, which means that even though a lot of you guys probably are wearing multiple hats and doing RTI, it's a general education responsibility. So it's getting the kids that need support before they ever get to us, and it probably will reduce the amount of students that get to us because they're getting early intervention and getting the bases that they need before they get to us. So please just keep that in mind, that RTI is not a gateway to special education. It's a process, and it helps students that are struggling that may not have disabilities. The second thing is developmental delay. So developmental delay stands alone. There should not be a time that a student has a developmental delay disability and a speech disability as a secondary. That's because according to the eligibility guidelines, if a child meets the criteria for another disability, they should not have a developmental disability. They can't be identified as DD. Also, if they have a speech issue, that could be covered with the DD label. So again, developmental delay should stand alone. There should not be a secondary disability category with that.
So if you have students where that's the case, where they're DD and speech as a secondary, a reevaluation is going to need to be held to make that adjustment, because speech is cumbersome under the DD label.
Yeah.
So reevaluation meetings would need to be scheduled to make that adjustment and fix that.
And then on the same topic, just a reminder that developmental delay ends at age 10. So the child can have a developmental delay disability through age 9. So they either need to be exited from special education or have a new disability category before their 10th birthday. So I would, if you have kids with developmental delay as a disability category, I would be looking at their birthdays and making sure that you're scheduling meetings plenty of time so that you can get new information and either get into a new disability category or exit from special education.
And there's the report in Enrich that's been created for you so you can know which kids in your building are going to be turning 10.
Perfect. The last reminder that I have is oral administration. In going through our IEPs for our audit, we noticed that oral administration is being used way more than it should be. So I just want to remind you, I am opening the guidance. I sent guidance out last year. It's also on our bookshelf for how to decide if a child needs oral administration. I know that we inherit a lot of IEPs with oral administration, but I would strongly consider that you reevaluate this at an IEP team meeting because the state is looking at the number of kids that are getting that accommodation, and there are a lot of kids that are getting it that probably don't need it. So there's eligibility criteria in here. There's different, at the very bottom, there's a checklist, and I would strongly suggest you bring this to an IEP meeting, because if you know you're going to have a parent that's going to fight you on it, you can say, look, here's our checklist, here's what the state says we need to do, and you can do it that way, and that will help back you up. But that's at the end of this. So please consider this when you're looking at an IEP and a child with oral administration, because we want to see that kids that have that truly need it. And again, this is on our bookshelf, and the link is also in our PowerPoint. You want to talk about that, Laura, Enrich files?
Yeah, so when we're looking at the Enrich files, we're talking about the uploads and attachments that you all do. One of the things we've learned from the audit is I'm having to submit the stuff through Enrich for the audit. It's been very challenging in terms of knowing which document that's been uploaded and attached goes with which meeting. So it's taken a lot of looking back and forth. So when you do your attachments, you need to label it just like we have out here, the student name, the item name, and the meeting date. That way it's easier to reference in terms of going back and having to upload or knowing which document goes with which. A lot of people are putting like signature page or signature pages or notice of meeting, but not identifying which meeting, which date that attaches to as an actual saved document. So it's made it very challenging to get the correct information uploaded. So from this point on, if you could be more diligent about how you label it, that would help out a whole lot.
Yeah. So if you could use that naming convention, that would be great. Mm-hmm. And that will also, when we, if the state has to get into our Enrich for whatever reason during this audit, that's going to help us get them in the right spot. Okay, so PowerSchool, what are you responsible for? Because there are things in PowerSchool that you are responsible for. One of them is being sure that your students are coded with the correct EFA code. If you need information on the EFA code and how that's done, please let Laura know. We can show you the chart, and I think it's on the bookshelf, all the specifications about the number of minutes that the students need and that kind of thing. But make sure that you're keeping your PowerSchool person up to date on those changes. So if you've got, a child that changes disability category, if their minutes drop below 250 minutes, or if they were below that and they rise above, you need to let your PowerSchool person know. You're also responsible for ensuring that students with testing accommodations are properly documented in Enrich, and this is actually supposed to say PowerSchool, because we order testing materials from what's in PowerSchool. So if you have a child with oral administration, that needs to be coded correctly in PowerSchool so that they can get the correct testing documents. That is pulled in a pre-code pull, and the date I will show you later on, but it's in November. So you need to be working with your PowerSchool person now and your testing coordinator to make sure that all those accommodations are accounted for so that your students get what they need when it comes to testing material. So the pre-code information for PowerSchool for assessments. Like I said, the assessment accommodations must be in PowerSchool. That includes regular assessments and SC Alt assessments, and they need to, if you have students that are SC Alt, they need to be coded like that in PowerSchool. So make sure that your PowerSchool coordinator has all the information, and then you could ask them to run those reports so that you can confirm the information is correct in there. There's also a report you can pull from Enrich that has been created. It's assessment participation. So if you're not sure what all assessments your students are taking, pull that report from Enrich, and that will help you.
It'll give you all the accommodations that are listed on the IEP. They do have an SC Alt assessment pull now. It's not very user-friendly, so I haven't shared it with everybody. But if you have students that are going to be taking the SC Alt, can you someone shoot me an email from your school and let me know just so we can start to gauge on how many students. And just to go back to the assessment and the PowerSchool, it's imperative for SC Alt that information be put in there because we don't order materials. The state pulls all that information for SC Alt right from PowerSchool. So if we don't have kids coded properly, we may have some that are supposed to take the test that aren't supposed to take the test. So all that information gets pulled directly from there.
I'm going to try to do this one more time. It's probably fruitless effort. Nope. Okay, well, I tried. Okay, so we've gotten a lot of questions. I know that the CGI, the Capacity and Growth Index, is new for you guys, and so we've gotten a lot of questions on it. I just want to remind everybody, for Tier 1 and Tier 2, the quarterly checklist needs only to be initialed. You don't have to submit evidence for each of those things. And so you'll just keep it, submit it when you initial it, and then again, submit it in quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4. Everyone, no matter what tier you're on, will have an IEP compliance desk audit. So you will submit the names and evidence for each student, and we'll take it from there. So just review the explanation of evidence, which is also on the bookshelf, because that's going to tell you what we're looking for when we say accommodation logs, when we say service logs, all those different kinds of things. If you're wondering about those things right now, we just need a month for each student. So we need a month of accommodation logs and a month of service logs. We don't need the entire year. We don't need all the way up until the day that we pull the audit. And Michelle, I saw your question about the state auditing your IEPs. Laura and I will have to talk about that and get back to you, because I think that might be a great idea. The state's auditing their IEPs, so maybe we don't need to. Okay.
You love me.
So CGI number 6 is due October 27th for Tier 2 and Tier 3 schools, and February 2nd for Tier 1 schools. We're looking for IEP compliance, accommodations and modifications, progress monitoring. So we want to see that if you said you're going to do probes, we want to see the probes, and then we want to see the progress reports, that you're actually reporting progress in a timely manner. We want to see timelines and attachments and finalization. So we're going to look and see, you know, the date you held the IEP, the date you finalized, are all the attachments there. We want to see that they were notified of their procedural safeguards, and then the curriculum.
So a lot of people, I know I've gotten a lot of questions about what should be submitted for each of these things. So go back to that evidence document that we gave you at the beginning of the year training, and I believe it's also on the bookshelf, and look and see what should be submitted. I know I'm getting a lot of questions like, what does this mean? What should I submit? So make sure you're looking at that first, and then if you have questions, ask. The only thing, I don't know if we added the curriculum on there, so that's been a big question. So what we want to know is, what are you using to teach your students with disabilities? What program are you using? Are you using reading A to Z, Voyager Math, LLI kits? What are you using? We're not saying you have to go out and buy a curriculum. We're saying we just want to get a feel for what schools are utilizing in terms of a research-based curriculum.
Okay, so upcoming, we've got our 1024 child count date, so there's going to be some deadlines that are associated with that. On 1027, we've got a couple CGI submissions due. On 11/1 is when you're going to be required to turn in your preliminary child count verification. On 11/7, we have our November webinar. 11/10 is the date that you need to make sure all of your assessment information is in PowerSchool correctly, because that's when the data is going to be pulled. And then starting on 11/13, we're going to have the state file reviews. So they're going to be actually in our office on that date, starting to get into files. Oh, and then Laura and I will be at the NACSA conference, so we will be out of the office next week, Monday through Thursday. I will be actually Monday through Friday because I have an advisory council meeting on Friday. But if we're going to have intermittent access to email and then phone calls, so just please kind of, if you really, really need us, you'll be able to get a hold of us. But if you can wait until the following week, please do that so that we don't have to catch up on a bunch of stuff.
So there won't be any calls that week?
Yes, if you have weekly or monthly calls that week, please know that those will be rescheduled for another time. And from here, I'm going to go hop over to the questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I will just answer the questions as we go through them. All right, so I think the first one is Robin. If they have an active plan, but we have a draft open for an upcoming meeting, is that okay?
Yeah.
That's fine as long as the plan is still current. So if let's say on 10/24, you are planning for an IEP meeting on 11/1, and the IEP is still current, that's fine that you have a draft open. Let's say on 10/24, you have an IEP meeting planned for 11/1, but the kid's IEP expired 10/13. That's not okay. That child is not going to be counted. Sorry, Ashley, I don't think there is a link to the chat, but next time you're in a WebEx, the chat box is at the upper right corner.
So I answered the other one.
Yep.
So Selena's question related to DD.
Selena, question related to developmental delay. You stated it is a standalone category. Does that mean a student can't be considered for another disability? Right. So if that student meets criteria for emotional disability, then that would be their disability category. They would not be a developmental delay child.
What date you need accommodation and service. So Robin, that's due based on the dates for the CGI, and then it's for the 2 or 5 students that you select.
Yeah, it depends on your tier. So a tier 1 school would just be 2 names, and let's say if I think I said that they were due on February 2nd, so I would just need 1 month of service logs by February 2nd for those 2 students. Any other questions? I'm going to give it a few minutes and see if anybody types, and then this will be posted to the bookshelf, and the documents that I showed you a little bit earlier in the webinar are also on the bookshelf. So the logs during the quarterly submission, you're just acknowledging that you have them. You're not actually turning them in. The item for November 10th was the data pre-code pull in PowerSchool. So by November 10th, make sure that you have your students' accommodations in Power School because it's going to be pulled that day for testing materials.
And Michelle, to answer your question about the state and the file review, so we have files being reviewed across the district from pretty much all of the schools. So we are going to ask that you still submit names for us to review, other than the ones you gave for the state audit. Sorry, I know you wanted a better answer. I do love you, Michelle. But everybody's files are going to, you know, there's files from everywhere being pulled.
Yeah.
We got to have job security here, girl.
Anybody else? All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and end the webinar, and as soon as we've got the recording downloaded, we'll post it on the bookshelf and send it out in an email. As always, if you need anything, please let us know. But please do check the bookshelf first, because we have really tried to be diligent about getting information up there. So check that first and then come to us if you've got questions. Sarah, the item for 1110 is the data pre-code in Power School. So you need to make sure that all of your testing accommodations are in Power School by November 10th, because that's when the data is going to be pulled. And we'll remind you of that by email. All right, everybody, have a great day.
Bye.